Oh, okay, Andrea, I want to welcome you to the Week 1 Huddle session. Hopefully in the future, more of your peers will join us. But as it stands now, it's just you and me. Maybe some people will come in late. If you have any questions, please make sure to click off the mute button. I only do that to limit the background noise. And I'd like to go through this week's material with you. So the first thing I want to look at is the setting up of the course. And I want to remind the class how important it is to check on these messages. I try to email them to you as well as post them. But I find that most students really are in the class multiple times a day, which is a great habit, but come to the announcements at least once a day to see what's up there. For example, this Huddle session is being recorded, and I will put the recording up there tomorrow, so you should see it in the announcements area. So if you weren't able to make it today, you will be able to watch it on playback. Also, you'll notice that each week I invite you to the Huddle, and you can simply click on any of these invitations to access the URL and quickly get into the Huddle session, which is every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. I'd like to turn now and look at this week's module. We have several things going on. Your introductions, they will not be graded, but they are mandatory. You do have to post to the introduction at least once. And the two graded discussion boards are the brand of view and discovering an angle. Each one is worth 20 points. I want to also show you that besides the launch post that I put here at the beginning of the week and the question that's up there, these are related in that I expand on the initial question down here, sometimes give you an example of how you can approach a question. I also respond to the students individually. Not everyone will get an individual response, but I do also address the class and try to turn the discussion, generally about midweek. So we're still talking about the same topic, but I give you a little bit more to go on so that not only are you talking to your peers, but you're talking to me as well. Anything that you post in the discussion is useful for grading, okay? Whether you're responding to my questions or responding to a peer's question or responding to the launch post. I'm looking for your 3 best posts on 3 different days, beginning no later than today, on Wednesdays, each week. Andrea, do you have any questions on that at all? If you do, you can take yourself off mute. Okay. Oh, there you are.
Sorry, my computer's lagging a little bit with the internet. Okay. No, I don't have any questions.
I'll just ask you here and there, and just feel free to jump in and stop me if I get ahead and you think of something. So if I go back to the module for the week, I also just want to review what you're responsible for. You're welcome, Andrea. As far as your written assignment this week, it's the profile process planning sheet. Boy, that's a long one. And I just want to show you that in week 2, this is where you'll actually submit your profile essay. So you want to get in here and look at your profile process planning sheet, and this will give you a little bit of background on how it's related to the profile essay. Remember, the profile essay is due next week, not this week. So it tells you here in the directions that you can find the directions for the actual planning sheet in the file section of the course. And I just want to show you where that's located for those of you who may have forgotten or are unfamiliar with Canvas. Right here, I clicked on Files, I went to Composition, and it has the Profile Planning Sheet Sample or Example, and here it has the actual document itself. So this is what you're going to write in, the second one here, and it pops up, and it guides you through the assignment itself. You may leave in these questions, it's perfectly okay. You can delete anything here in the brackets. Okay. Please be aware to use complete sentences, use Grammarly, use your Microsoft Word spelling and grammar check. Do everything you can because all of that is part of your grade. So you have 3 questions here. Then you're analyzing your reader. They'd like this to be in paragraph format. And reflecting on your role as a writer, paragraph format. Again, you can get rid of these directions and just write underneath the prompt. If you get confused or you would just like to see a sample of one of these profiles, there is one right in the file section, and you can see the comments off to the side kind of give you direction on what's going right in this sample. So you can use this to guide your writing. Andrea, if you want to use the chat, you can just tell me, do you have any questions on the assignment for the week? Okay. I'd also like to point out the rubric section. Again, this is in the files area. You should always be looking at this to guide your writing. I hear you coming in. Andrea?
Yes, ma'am. It's a bit slow. My internet's been messing up with the rain. What if I don't get out much into the community to give perspective on a certain place?
Well, is there anything,
or person?
Is there anything unique about your community that you would want to write about, or anyone unique in the community that you know about that you could possibly research? Maybe you don't have first-hand information.
Yes, ma'am, because I'm having a hard time coming up with an actual topic.
Okay. You know, in the past, people have taken places that they've been to, that they visited.
Yes, ma'am.
Or events that they attended. I remember, you know, a couple of them from last term where they were looking at unique things within their town. And whether they'd been there or not, you know, some had been there, some were just writing about it. So if there's something unique to your town, your state, your, you know, wherever you're at, you can broaden it out. Does that help at all?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Great. Okay, and then I wanted to look at the rubric because, you know, once you're writing and you've looked at the example and then you've filled out what you're going to submit, you want to look at this rubric to say, okay, here's what my instructor is grading me on. Let me see if I can do a self-grade. And then look at where you're being graded. So the first one is defining the topic, the angle, and the purpose. So to what degree do you think you met this standard? And you do the same with the audience profile, and the same thing with the writer reflection. And then style and mechanics, again, goes back to your punctuation, your capitalization. Do you have run-on sentences? Do you have fragments? So all of that is going to be analyzed up to 50 points. And of course, I want you to score as high as you can and to earn as many points as you can. So it's always good to have the rubric out so that you can do a self-assessment of what your document looks like and how well it's compared to this rubric. When I return the grades to you, and again, I will announce that on the announcements page, I'll say the grades for week 1 are graded. Please review my feedback, and you will see this very chart attached to it with the points that you've earned and with an explanation if you lost any points. So again, the time you take to look at this at home will serve you well because you'll be able to pretty much analyze where you're at in a specific assignment. Again, the files are found right here in the navigation menu, and then you're looking at composition files for all of your assignments and the rubrics for each of your assignments. Any questions on that one, Andrea?
No.
Nothing on that? Yes, I can.
Okay.
Okay. So now that we've looked at that, one more new thing that's just been added, and this is not in any way tied to your grade, but I do ask that you take the time to do it, is the week 1, 2, and 3 pulse check. And this is just a quick little poll that DeVry puts in there for you. It's a little survey, totally anonymous, and it's going to ask you several questions. How do you feel about the course? Any additional feedback you'd like about the course itself. I do not write the course. This is done by course developers, so if you have some things or some suggestions to make about the course, please don't feel that you're insulting me in any way. I don't write the assignments. I don't write the lecture material. If you feel that there's something that causes you consternation, that you're having difficulty with, that maybe you think is above and beyond, then feel free to put that in the feedback. You're not insulting me at all. But at the same time, if you feel there's something I should be doing that I'm not doing that would help you to get a better grade, to achieve, please let me know, because those are things we can take care of, whether you do that in writing in the pulse check or you send me an email. Some of your ideas are very good, and I've been able to incorporate them throughout the class. All right. So we're going to turn to the lesson for the week, and one of the things I said in our agenda is that we would talk about narrative voice. I just want to check something before we do that. Okay. So when we speak about narrative voice, you've probably heard about this as first, second, or third person. And I was quite surprised the last time that I taught this class about how many students had some confusion as to when you should use a particular voice. Now, anytime you're going to use first person narration, you're included in the narrative that you're writing. So for example, if I ask you to reflect upon an important event that you witnessed or were a part of, obviously you're going to use first-person narration. You're going to say, I attended a concert, or I visited Yellowstone National Park. That's you as part of the action. That's first-person, very opinionated narration. And you see the pronouns that we use with narrative voice in the first person are I, we, me, why, mine, us, our, ours, and ourselves. It is primarily used for autobiographical writing, such as a personal essay or a memoir. It's also used in opinion pieces. And on site, for example, if we watch a video together and I ask the class to reflect or give their opinion about a particular video, that would be an example of a very personal writing, and you would employ first-person narration. You want to, though, avoid using this type of narration in academic essays. So when you're writing a research paper, for example, you're going to be employing third-person narration. Now, we're not doing a research paper right now. We're writing something personally that we've attended or witnessed, etc. So it's okay in week 1 and week 2 to use the narrative voice in the first person. But as you start writing research papers and writing more academically, you want to take that out of your writing. I see this a lot in the introductions where students will say, in this essay I will discuss. And I always go, oh, and I just kind of cringe, because it's like, no, the whole essay is yours. You own it. You don't have to announce that you're going to be writing the essay. I know that. You know, as soon as I click on your name and I download your document, I know it's yours. So it's a very self-conscious way to write if you're not writing something that involves your opinion. Any questions on that? Okay. So let's move on to second person. Now, second person is tricky because I'm going to say that you should never be using second person narration unless you're writing directions, like directions for a recipe. My daughter's learning this too, Andrea says. That's great. See, now you can be her teacher. So with second person, this kind of slips into our language because we usually are writing very informally. And we'll talk later in the term about the differences between formal language and informal language. But for our purposes, let's start by understanding first, second, and third person. So second person is any one of these three, you, your, or yourself. Any of those three words, you're talking in second person. Now, you must have read the back of a cake box, for example, and it will say, you will need the following. That's second person. They're giving you directions. And then they show you a mixing bowl and 3 eggs and, a cup of water and half a cup of oil. They're giving you directions. That's perfectly acceptable. If you take a technical writing course at DeVry, you'll probably be writing in second person because you'll be doing a lot of writing instructions. So, sorry about that. So you're going to use these pronouns when addressing one or more than one person. Second person is often appropriate for email messages, presentations, and business and technical writing. You're almost never going to use it in academic writing. And I find myself doing it, and I have 2 degrees in English. And, when I write quickly, that word you will slip in, even when I'm writing something academic or I'm writing an email to my faculty. And, and even though it says to write it using you, it feels kind of strange. One of the tricks that your high school teachers will have taught you is take out the word you and use the word one. Well, sometimes that feels very formal. Instead of saying you slip in one should use the following, and that just seems really formal. So sometimes we tell you use general nouns, like instead of saying you should write email this way, you can say people should write email this way, or employees should write people this way, and that gets you right around that you problem. And Andrea says a person or someone. Yeah. So that's second person, and we almost never want to see this, even in this course. In the first essay, could I understand that? Well, if you're trying to get me to go see a local falls in your town, you might say, you really need to come and see this. And that would be understandable. But if I'm asking you to look at a advertisement and analyze it, well, I shouldn't be in your discussion, and you shouldn't be in your discussion unless I ask directly for your opinion. But if I'm asking for analysis, I'm really asking you to look at that thing and then go to third person, right? So for third person, it's he, she, it, they, and them. It's the most common point of view in fiction writing and in traditional academic writing. You are not in research anymore. You are not in that academic paper. You're reporting about something. And this gives your opinion great heft and breadth. It really shows that you're an objective party who looked and analyzed things, and now you're presenting your research. When you put I in your essay, for example, if we go back to first person, you're almost, when you say things like, I believe, in my opinion, it's something that I was brought up doing. You're almost taking away from the power of your writing because you're saying, oh, well, I believe this way, but you don't have to. Well, no. You did the research. You have a point of view. You have an angle. That's something we're talking about in this week's discussions. You have every right to say that without saying, well, in my opinion or I believe. You also don't want to suddenly break out of an academic research paper and then say, I had an issue with this several years ago, and then you start telling a story. Because it's like, wait, first you're presenting research, and we're in third person, then all of a sudden you shift us back to first person, and you start telling a narrative about something you did years ago. It's very jarring to the reader. So if you can understand first, second, and third person, and when to use them and when not to, that's a win for this week, That's great. So I'm going to ask you, Andrea, do you have any questions about any of these narrative forms? No, ma'am. Thanks. Are you going to be able to explain that to your daughter now? Good. So the second thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight are brainstorming. And when you get your ideas together, and I'm glad Andrea's here because she says, well, I'm not quite sure what I should write about, you know. And maybe now she has something in her mind. Maybe something's fermenting there now that we had a little bit of a discussion. Yes, she says. So now I want to see how we can brainstorm about that idea that she's having. Now, when you think about brainstorming, I'm sure your instructors in high school taught you about free writing, where you just kind of sit down and you write everything you're thinking about. You know, I call it vomiting on the page. You just kind of write, right? The big flow of ideas. Even if in your mind you say, you're supposed to write that down. If you say, you write that down. And students can do that, but, you know, not very effectively. Sometimes I find my students don't get much out of it. Then they might have taught you clustering, where you put that idea in the middle and you draw little spokes from it, and you just kind of do word association. So if we put the word Yellowstone National Park, what do you think about it? You might say mountains, geysers, hot trees, you know, and then you try to couple it. Vacation, Andrea says. That's great, Andrea. But there are some other ways to do brainstorming, right? One is called brain writing. And if I had more people in the class, we'd do this together. But Andrea's here, and I'm happy for that, so I'll just explain it. Brain writing is when you think of that person or place or thing, and you write down anything you associate with him or her in one post. So it's kind of like free writing and kind of like clustering, but you don't write every and So if you look at Steve Jobs, let's say young Steve Jobs up there, what do you think? I mean, I'm looking at him going, young and handsome and Steve Jobs, and the word Apple is coming to my mind, and my trusty old iPhone is there. And then I'm thinking of things that are not so nice, like pancreatic cancer and death. And then somehow I associate him with Bill Gates, even though they're not related, but that comes to my mind. But brain writing helps you to look at things, and then you go, well, am I really going to write about Steve Jobs, or did I want to write about death, or did I want to write about pancreatic cancer, or did I want to write about Bill Gates? You know, you try looking at where your writing is moving you. So that's one way to brainstorm. Another way is called figure storming. So, you know, you can think about this for your week 1 assignment. If you have someone you're going to write about or something you're going to write about, you think about that and what others would say about that person or that place. Sometimes you can find that online. You could easily look online at Steve Jobs and write what people said about him, people who worked with him, people he fired, people who were successful with him, people who were friends of his, family members. Or you can think to yourself, if I would have worked with him, what might I have said about him? And this helps you, again, to break free. You're storming that figure. You're storming that person, that place, that idea. So you name the person or the place, and you think about what someone would have to say about that. That's another way to get started thinking. And I think this is the last one. It's called rapid ideation. So you name a famous person, and you create a list or draw a picture. Now, I'm sorry, I have a spelling error in there I'm seeing now, interviewing. So you think about, if you were interviewing this person, what topics would you ask them? If you could sit down with Steve Jobs, for example, just keeping on that theme, what are some questions you would want to answer? And, you know, when you do that, you think to yourself, I can actually find the answers to that. And that's your research right there. So sitting down and asking yourself, if I was interviewing Steve Jobs, what kind of questions would I ask? The answers are probably somewhere out there, and it's up to you to find them. And that's where your research comes in, and that's where a good research paper stems from, by really critically thinking about the topic. You can also draw pictures. Now, why would I do that? Why would I sit there and draw a picture of my iPhone? Because it kind of breaks that left brain kind of thinking where we think linearly and we put things in lists and we categorize things. And sometimes that gets boring and monotonous. Sometimes when you free yourself to just doodle about the person, place, or thing you're writing about, that just breaks up the way you're thinking, and it gives more creativity to your thinking. So these are 3 strategies you can use to brainstorm when you're writing any paper in class. Okay. So believe it or not, because we have this one last slide. Your topic, the rhetorical situation, is when you look at what you're being asked to do in an assignment. When you're looking at your topic, you create an angle. Let me give you an example of something that just happened today in class. I was teaching a course called The Creative Mind, and the students had to break up into groups, and they had different topics, and one of the topics, okay, so I think I'm doing that now, Andrea, but tell me if I don't answer your question. So one of the questions is called, one of the topics is called leadership. And we said, okay, leadership, that's good, but what's your angle? What are you looking at? And the group thought about it for a little while, and they said, well, there are plenty of things we can do with leadership, but what we want to focus on is the relationship between empathy and leaders, and how those overlap. That to be a good leader, you actually have to be empathetic. You have to be able to identify with your team, the people you're leading. And then that led into a discussion of, are leaders always bosses, or can you be a leader even if you're not given a leadership, quote-unquote, title? So that's where this group was taking their brainstorming. So they started with a topic, and then they looked at their angle. The context is, how are you going to deliver this? So if we go back to my example, this group that was working on leadership is going to be doing a presentation. So the context is, I'm in a classroom full of freshmen, and I'm delivering a presentation. In your case, you're an online student writing for your peers, or at that level of college peers, and your college instructor. And of course, you're writing for yourself. The context is you're going to be handing in a paper online. And that's going to be very different than if I asked you to do the week 1 assignment and do it thinking that you're going to present it to a group of kindergarten kids, right? So if you were going to take that leadership and you were going to talk about empathy, would you really talk about empathy and use that word with a 5-year-old? I don't think they would have any clue what you're talking about, even if you defined it. So you might have to do something different. You might have to present using puppets, or you might have to present using a comic, or you might have to present doing role play. So that's your context. And then, of course, you want to consider your readers, which I just kind of overlapped. Your readers are college-level students, so you're writing at that level, yourself as a college-level student, and your instructor as someone who has several degrees. So you want to write at that level. And then you always want to establish early on, what is my purpose? I'm writing this paper, and once the reader is done with it, what do I want them to do with the information? Do I want to change their opinion? Do I want to inform them? Do I want them to compare and contrast that with something they know? Do I want to start an argument? So what's your purpose when you're writing the paper? All of that goes into the rhetorical situation that you're going to be facing as each one of these assignments comes up. And Andrea, that went by so quickly. Can you just come off mute and ask that last question that you had?
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, whenever in the discussion that you have this rhetorical situation diagram, do you want us to just state the topic, the angle, the context, the reader, just by one, or do you want it paragraph form?
Okay.
How are you wanting
That's, you can do it in a list if that's easier for you. For some people, they prefer a paragraph. But yeah, what I asked you to do is look at one of those articles that you had put up there, that you had posted, and then try to identify the rhetorical situation for that writer. Why was he or she writing? What were they attempting to do? Because my mind is, if you can identify that in someone's writing, then you can mimic that in your own. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
It does. Perfect.
Awesome. So that's the last slide I have for the evening. This has been a little over 30 minutes, a half hour. And Andrea got her money's worth because she's here tonight, and hopefully we can get some more people in next week. But Andrea, I want to tell you that as a result of you coming in tonight, you only have to post twice to each of the discussions. So you do not have to meet the 3. This counts as your 3rd post in each discussion board. Okay?
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. So thank you for spending your evening with me, and I say this to you and to anyone who's listening. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm here for you. Sometimes that wasn't me crying, I promise. But I am here for you by email, by phone, by text, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you in the discussions.